All eyes are fixed on Capitol Hill this morning, where millions of Americans are waiting on the Senate to decide the fate of the long-awaited coronavirus stimulus relief bill. Last night, the House overwhelmingly approved President Trump's demand to increase the proposed stimulus checks from $600 to $2,000. Now members of the president's own party will determine whether his request will become a reality. Paula Reid is traveling with the president and reports from West Palm Beach, Florida.
The bill is passed.
With one hurdle cleared in the House, President Trump and Speaker Pelosi, rarely on the same page, are calling on reluctant Republicans in the Senate to get on board and more than triple the $600 in COVID relief payments to struggling Americans.
Republicans have a choice. Vote for this legislation or vote to deny the American people the bigger paychecks they need.
But passage in the Senate is uncertain, with the $2,000 stimulus checks inflating the total COVID assistance in this round north of $1 trillion. And most of the president's Republican allies have no interest in increasing spending on this. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called on the president to persuade them.
He talked about it. Now she's got to act. People need the money.
The yeas are 322. The nays are 87.
And in a scathing bipartisan rebuke, the House overrode Mr. Trump's veto of a more than $740 billion defense spending bill. The president had objected to several unrelated items, including the fact that lawmakers would not curtail legal protections for social media companies, and the president also opposed the renaming of some military bases honoring Confederate leaders.
This vote is about supporting our troops and defending America. While not perfect, this bill does a good job of advancing both and should be supported.
Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden is accusing the Trump administration of obstructing the transition by intentionally withholding critical information, including matters of national security.
We have encountered roadblocks from the political leadership at the Department of Defense and the Office of Management and Budget. It's nothing short, in my view, of irresponsibility.
I want to bring in CBS News White House correspondent Paula Reid. Paula, thank you for being here. We got a lot to talk about today.
We sure do, Jamie. There is news breaking all over the place down here in Florida.
Well, I have to ask you, I was reading somewhere, it looks like in terms of these stimulus checks and the stimulus bill, that the Senate may not take this up till Friday. Where does it stand now, and what can we expect next?
Well, now that it has successfully passed the House, it heads to the Senate, and it's just really not clear right now what's going to happen there. We know, for example, some Senate Republicans, like the president's close ally, Senator Lindsey Graham, has thrown his support behind this idea of increased stimulus payments. But the key player is, as always, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and he has not signaled what he intends to do here, Jamie. He is facing a lot of pressure from some strange bedfellows. Both President Trump, Bernie Sanders, some other Democrats are really pressing Republicans to just get on board and increase these stimulus payments. But this has been a real effort by the majority leader not to make this bill any larger than it was, not to do higher payments. The majority leader did a bit of a victory lap last week when the original bill for $600 payments for individuals, some individuals who qualify, when that passed, he was quite proud that he was able to block a larger proposal by Democrats. So now that he has pressure from the president, from a lot of high-profile Democrats, it will be interesting to see how he handles it. But he is, of course, a master of these legislative arts.
It seems, too, that it could be pretty politically risky, really, for some Republicans to vote no.
Yeah, and depending on when this vote comes down, if they were to vote no, if they were to torpedo this, that would really be difficult for their colleagues down in Georgia who are facing a critical Senate runoff in just a few days here. That runoff could decide or will decide control of the U.S. Senate. And that's one of the reasons that the president's near blocking of this original stimulus legislation was a concern. Democrats in Georgia were using that over Republicans Republicans. So incredibly complicated politically, but it's really interesting to see House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders, and President Trump all on the same page. And we'll see what the Senate Majority Leader does today.
It's like a political chess match. We know, Paula, that the House overwhelmingly passed the National Defense Authorization Act that President Trump vetoed. What sort of message does this send to the president and potentially his supporters? Is it a good sign for the incoming Biden administration? How do we sort this one out?
Well, it's interesting because it's showing that originally, we'll go back a little bit. Originally, this bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, as it has for about 60 years. This is a critical defense spending bill, but the president had threatened to veto it if lawmakers didn't add provisions that would curtail protections for social media companies. But even members of his own party said that has nothing to do with this. The president also objected to some aspects of the bill that would require certain military bases named after Confederate leaders to be renamed. So once the president vetoed it, the question was, well, if they still have the same number of votes, won't they be able to override that veto? But we saw some Republicans, Jamie, who, while they were willing to support this bill, they weren't necessarily willing to override the president. It's very unusual. This would be the first time this has happened in this administration. But if they do successfully override this bill, it will be a message to the American people that the president's priorities, curtailing social media protections, his feelings about military bases named for Confederate leaders, that is not necessarily a deal breaker for the entire Republican establishment. But this is a critical defense spending bill, and it would be surprising if they do not override this veto.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do we know when they're going to vote and what we can expect from that vote?
Again, it all comes down to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell when he brings it up, how they're going to vote. He's really keeping his cards close to the vest here. He has a lot of different things that he is weighing. For example, as Senator Bernie Sanders, he's also threatening that if they don't bring one vote, they may try to block another. It's very complicated right now on the Hill, and it's just not clear when these will come up, what order they will come up, what concessions could potentially be made. It's actually quite fascinating. This is usually kind of a dead time on the Hill and in Washington. But once again, here we are covering just breaking news every few hours.
Yeah, never a dull moment. I mean, why change now, right? It's been years of this. So
why?
There are reports we've been seeing this morning that a group of Republican senators, and it appears a day hitting the links, ultimately led to President Trump's signing of the bipartisan stimulus package. What more can you tell us about those conversations? Do you have any inside information? Who was involved? What was discussed?
Well, Jamie, just about the only thing we know about President Trump's time here is that he did play golf with his closest, really one of his closest, Republican allies, Senator Lindsey Graham. They were spotted together on the golf course on Christmas Day. And while we didn't get a readout from that meeting, the senator tweeted about it shortly thereafter, expressing his support for the president's effort to increase these stimulus payments, saying that he hopes Congress got on board. But again, Jamie, as we discussed, the roadblock to larger stimulus payments has been other Republicans. But reportedly during that round of golf, the president was persuaded that he should sign the bill as is. This bill that he had been threatening lawmakers he would veto if they didn't increase these checks going to Americans. But he agreed to sign it as is if, in exchange, Congress agreed to move forward on some of his priorities. For example, voting on increasing these stimulus payments. But I will say there was already a vote scheduled on that, but we already saw it yesterday. It passed in the House. Now it's on its way to the Senate. But they were also, according to the president, assured him that they would move forward with other priorities, like curtailing protections for social media companies, looking at that, reviewing these unsubstantiated allegations about voter fraud. But, Jamie, those are all promises for process, not for actual policy. And the big question is now, well, what will the Senate Majority Leader do? What will other Republicans do? Was the president sort of rolled here, convinced into signing a bill he didn't like in exchange for process, but no actual change in policy? That's what we're watching for today.
All right, we will keep watching. Paula Reid, thank you so much.